Chapter 1 of the Last Journals of David Livingstone in Central Africa from 1865 to his death, Volume 1 of 2, 1866 through 1868, by David Livingstone and Horace Waller. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 1. Arrival at Zanzibar. Hearty reception by Said Majid the Sultan. Murder of Baron Vanderdecken. The slave market. Preparations for starting to the interior. Embarkation in HMS Penguin and Dhow. Rovuma Bay impracticable. Disembarks at Mikadani. Joy at traveling once more. Trouble with sepoys. Camels attacked by tsetse fly and by sepoys. Jungle sappers. Meets old enemies. The Makande. Lake Nangandi. Gum copal diggings. Zanzibar, 28th January 1866. After a passage of 23 days from Bombay, we arrived at this island in the Thule, which was one of Captain Sherard Osborne's late Chinese fleet, and now a present from the Bombay government to the Sultan of Zanzibar. I was honored with a commission to make the formal presentation, and this was intended by H.E., the governor in council, to show how much estimation I was held, and thereby induce the Sultan to forward my enterprise. The letter to His Highness was a commendatory epistle in my favor, for which consideration on the part of Sir Bartle Frere I was deeply grateful. It runs as follows. To His Highness, Sejuel Majid, Sultan of Zanzibar. Copy. Your Highness, I trust that this will find you in the enjoyment of health and happiness. I have requested my friend, Dr. David Livingstone, who is already personally well and favorably known to your Highness, to convey to you the assurance of the continual friendship and goodwill of Her Majesty's government in India. Your Highness is already aware of the benevolent objects of Dr. Livingstone's life and labors, and I feel assured that your Highness will continue to him the favor and protection which you have already shown to him on former occasions, and that your Highness will direct every aid to be given to him within your Highness's dominions, which may tend to further the philanthropic designs to which he has devoted himself, and which, as your Highness is aware, are viewed with the warmest interest by Her Majesty's government, both in India and England. I trust your Highness will favor me with continued accounts of your good health and welfare. I remain your Highness's sincere friend, signed, H.B.E. Frere. Bombay Castle, 2nd January, 1866. When we arrived, Dr. Seward, the acting consul, was absent at the cycles on account of serious failure of health. Mr. Schultz, however, was representing him, but he too was at the time away. Dr. Seward was expected back daily, and he did arrive on the 31st. I requested a private interview with the Sultan, and on the following day, 29th, called and told him the nature of my commission to His Highness. He was very gracious and seemed pleased with the gift, as well he might, for the Thule is fitted up in the most gorgeous manner. We asked a few days to put her in perfect order, and this being the Ramadan, or fasting month, he was all the more willing to defer a visit to the vessel. Dr. Seward arranged to have an audience with the Sultan to carry out his instructions, which were to present me in a formal manner. Captain Bradshaw of the Wasp, with Captain Latham of the Vigilant, and Bishop Tozer, were to accompany us in full dress, but the Sultan had a toothache and gum boil, and could not receive us. He, however, placed one of his houses at my disposal, and appointed a man who speaks English to furnish board for my men and me, and also for Captain Brebner of the Thule and his men. 6th February, 1866. The Sultan, being still unable to come, partly on account of toothache and partly on account of Ramadan, he sent his commodore, Captain Abdullah, to receive the Thule. When the English flag was hauled down in the Thule, it went up to the mainmast of the Iskander Shah, and was saluted by 21 guns. Then the Wasp saluted the Arab flag with an equal number, which honor being duly acknowledged by a second royal salute from the Iskander Shah, Captain Abdullah's frigate, the ceremony ended. Next day, the 7th, we were received by the Sultan, and through his interpreter I told him that his friend, the governor of Bombay, had lately visited the South Maratha princes, and had pressed on them the necessity of education. The world was moving on, and those who neglected to acquire knowledge would soon find that power slipped through their fingers, and that the Bombay government, in presenting His Highness with a portion of steam power, showed its desire to impart one of the greatest improvements of modern times, not desiring to monopolize power, but hoping to lift up others with themselves. And I wish for him to live 100 years and enjoy all happiness. The idea was borrowed partly from Sir Bartle Frere's addresses, because I thought it would have more weight if he heard a little from the source than if it emanated from myself. He was very anxious that Captain Brebner and his men, in returning to India, should take a passage from him in the Nadir Shah, one of his men of war, although he had already placed his things about the Vigilant to proceed to Schuylkill, and thence to Bombay. We persuaded Captain Brebner to accept His Highness's hospitality. He had evidently set his heart on sending them back with suitable honors, and an hour after consent was given to go by the Nadir Shah, he signed an order for the money to fit her out. 11th February, 1866. One of the foremost subjects that naturally occupied my mind here was the sad loss of the Baron Vanderdecken on the river Juba or Aljib. The first intimation of the unfortunate termination of his explorations was the appearance of Lieutenant von Schaik at his place, who had left without knowing whether his leader was dead or alive, but an attack had been made on the encampment which had been planned after the steamer struck the rocks and filled, and 2 of the Europeans were killed. The attacking party came from the direction in which the Baron and Dr. Link went, and 3 men of note in it were slain. Von Schaik went back from Zanzibar to Brava to ascertain the fate of the Baron, and meanwhile several native sailors from Zanzibar had been allowed to escape from the scene of confusion to Brava. 18th February, 1866. All the Europeans went to pay visits of congratulations to His Highness the Sultan upon the conclusion of the Ramadan, when sweetmeats were placed before us. He desired me to thank the governor of Bombay for his magnificent gift, and to state that although he would like to have me always with him, yet he would show me the same favor in Africa which he had done here. He added that the Thule was at my service to take me to the Rovuma whenever I wished to leave. I replied that nothing had been wanting on his part. He had done more than I expected, and I was sure that His Excellency the Governor would be delighted to hear that the vessel promoted his health and prosperity. Nothing would delight him more than this. He said that he meant to go out in her on Wednesday next, 20th. Bishop Tozer, Captain Fraser, Dr. Steer, and all the English were present. The sepoys came in and did obeisance, and I pointed out the Nassik lads as those who had been rescued from slavery, educated, and sent back to their own country by the governor. Surely he must see that some people in the world act from other than selfish motives. In the afternoon, Sheikh Suleiman, his secretary, came with a letter for the governor to be conveyed by Lieutenant Brebner, I.N., in the Nadir Shah, which is to sail tomorrow. He offered money to the lieutenant, but this could not be heard of for a moment. The translation of the letter is as follows, and is in answer to that which I brought. To His Excellency the Governor of Bombay, after compliments. The end of my desire is to know ever that Your Excellency's health is good. As for me, your friend, I am very well. Your honored letter borne by Dr. Livingstone duly reached me, and all that you said about him I understood. I will show him respect, give him honor, and help him in all his affairs, and that I have already done this, I trust he will tell you. I hope you will let me rest in your heart, and that you will send me many letters. If you need anything, I shall be glad and will give it. Your sincere friend, Majid bin Said. Dated 2nd Shawwal, 1282. 18th February, 1866. 2nd March, 1866. A northern dhow came in with slaves. When this was reported to the Sultan, he ordered it to be burned, and we saw this done from the window of the consulate. But he has very little power over northern Arabs. He has shown a little vigor of late. He wished to raise a revenue by a charge of 10% on all articles brought into town for sale, but this is clearly contrary to treaty which provides that no monopoly shall be permitted, and no dues save that of 5% import duty. The French consul bullies him. Indeed, the French system of dealing with the natives is well expressed by that word. No wonder they cannot gain influence among them. The greatest power they exercise is by lending their flag to slaving dhows, so that it covers that nefarious traffic. The stench arising from 1.5 miles or 2 square miles of exposed sea beach, which is the general depository of the filth of the town, is quite horrible. At night it is so gross or crass one might cut out a slice and manure a garden with it. It might be called Stinkabar rather than Zanzibar. No one can long enjoy good health here. On visiting the slave market, I found about 300 slaves exposed for sale, the greater part of whom came from Lake Nyassa and the Shire River. I am so familiar with the peculiar faces and markings or tattooings that I expect them to recognize me. Indeed, one woman said that she had heard of our passing up Lake Nyassa in a boat, but she did not see me. Others came from Chipeta, southwest of the lake. All who have grown up seem ashamed at being hawked about for sale. The teeth are examined, the cloth lifted up to examine the lower limbs, and a stick is thrown for the slave to bring, and thus exhibit his paces. Some are dragged through the crowd by the hand, and the price is called out incessantly. Most of the purchasers were northern Arabs and Persians. This is the period when the Sultan's people may not carry slaves coastwise, but they simply cannot, for the wind is against them. Many of the dhows leave for Madagascar and thence come back to complete their cargoes. The Arabs are said to treat their slaves kindly, and this also may be said of native masters. The reason is, master and slave partake of the general indolence, but the lot of the slave does not improve with the general progress in civilization. While no great disparity of rank exists, his energies are little tasked, but when society advances, wants multiply, and to supply these the slave's lot grows harder. The distance between master and man increases as the lust of gain is developed, hence we can hope for no improvement in the slave's condition unless the master returns to or remains in barbarism. 6th March, 1866. Rains have begun now that the sun is overhead. We expect the Penguin daily to come from Johanna and take us to the Rovuma. It is an unwholesome place. 6 of my men have fever. Few retain health long, and considering the lowness of the island and the absence of sanitary regulations in the town, it is not to be wondered at. The Sultan has little power, being only the successor to the captain of the horde of Arabs who came down and overran the island and maritime coast of the adjacent continent. He is called only Said or Syed, never Sultan, and they can boast of choosing a new one if he does not suit them. Some coins were found in digging here which have Kufic inscriptions and are about 900 years old. The island is low. The highest parts may not be more than 150 feet above the sea. It is of a coral formation with sandstone conglomerate. Most of the plants are African, but clove trees, mangoes, and coconut groves give a luxuriant South Sea island look to the whole scenery. We visited an old man today, the richest in Zanzibar, who is to give me letters to his friends at Tanganyika, and I am trying to get a depot of goods for provisions formed there, so that when I reach it I may not be destitute. 18th March, 1866. I have arranged with Korji, a Banian, who farms the custom house revenue here, to send a supply of beads, cloth, flour, tea, coffee, and sugar to Ujiji on Lake Tanganyika. The Arab there, with whom one of Korji's people will remain in charge of the goods, is called Thani bin Suliam. Yesterday we went to take leave of the Sultan and to thank him for all his kindness to me and my men, which has indeed been very great. He offered me men to go with me, and another letter if I wished it. He looks very ill. I have received very great kindness during my stay from Dr. and Mrs. Seward. They have done everything for me in their power. May God Almighty return it all abundantly into their bosoms in the way that He best can. Dr. Seward's views of the policies pursued here, I have no doubt, are the right ones. In fact, the only ones which can be looked back to with satisfaction, or that have probability of success among a race of pariah Arabs. The Penguin came a few days ago, and Lieutenant Garforth in command agrees to take me down to the Rovuma River and land me there. I have a dhow to take my animals, 6 camels, 3 buffaloes, and a calf, 2 mules, and 4 donkeys. I have 13 sepoys, 10 Johanna men, 9 Nassik boys, 2 Shupanga men, and 2 Wayus, Wakatani, and Chuma. It might be well to point out that several of these men had previously been employed by Dr. Livingstone on the Zambezi and Shire. Thus, Musa, the Johanna man, was a sailor on the Lady Nyassa, whilst Susie and Amoda were engaged at Shupanga to cut wood for the Pioneer. The 2 Wayu lads, Wakatani and Chuma, were liberated from the slavers by the doctor and Bishop Mackenzie in 1861, and lived for 3 years with the mission party at Chibisas before they were engaged by Livingstone. The Nassau lads were entire strangers and were trained in India. 19th March, 1866. We start this morning at 10 a.m. I trust that the Most High may prosper me in this work, granting me influence in the eyes of the heathen and helping me to make my intercourse beneficial to them. 22nd March, 1866. We reached Rovuma Bay today and anchored about 2 miles from the mouth of the river in 5 fathoms. I went up the left bank to see if the gullies which formerly ran into the bay had altered so as to allow camels to cross them. They seemed to have become shallower. There was no wind for the dhow, and as for the man-of-war towing her, it was out of the question. On the 23rd, the cutter did try to tow the dhow, but without success, as a strong tide runs constantly out of the river at this season. A squall came up from the southeast, which would have taken the dhow in, but the master was on board the Penguin and said he had no large sail. I got him off to his vessel, but the wind died away before we could reach the mouth of the river. 24th March, 1866. I went to the dhow, and there being no wind, I left orders with the captain to go up the right bank should a breeze arise. Mr. Fane, midshipman, accompanied me up the left bank above to see if we could lead the camels along in the water. Near the point where the river first makes a little bend to the north, we landed, and found 3 formidable gullies, and jungle so thick with bush, date palms, twining bamboo, and hooked thorns that one could scarcely get along. Further inland it was sticky mud, thickly planted over with mangrove roots, and gullies in whose soft banks one sank over the ankles. No camels could have moved, and men with extreme difficulty might struggle through, but we never could have made an available road. We came to a she-hippopotamus lying in a ditch, which did not cover her. Mr. Fane fired into her head, and she was so upset that she nearly fell backwards in plunging up the opposite bank. Her calf was killed, and was like a sucking pig, though in appearance as large as a full-grown sow. We now saw that the dhow had a good breeze, and she came up along the right bank and grounded at least a mile from the spot where the mangroves ceased. The hills, about 200 feet high, begin about 2 or 3 miles above that, and they looked invitingly green and cool. My companion and I went up from the dhow inland to see if the mangroves gave way to a more walkable country, but the swamp covered over thickly with mangroves only became worse the farther we receded from the river. The whole is flooded at high tides, and had we landed, all the men, we should have been laid up with fever ere we could have attained the higher land, which on the right bank bounds the line of vision, and the first part of which lies so near. I thought I had better land on the sand belt on the left of Rovuma Bay, and then explore and get information from the natives, none of whom had as yet come near us. So I ordered the dhow to come down to the spot next day, and went on board the Penguin. Lieutenant Garforth was excessively kind, and though this is his best time for cruising in the north, he most patiently agreed to wait and help me to land. 24th March, 1866. During the night it occurred to me that we should be in a mess if after exploration and information from the natives we could find no path, and when I mentioned this, Lieutenant Garforth suggested that we should proceed to Kilwa. So at 5 a.m. I went up to the dhow with Mr. Fane, and told the captain that we were going there. He was loud in his protestations against this, and strongly recommended the port of Mikadani as quite near to Rovuma, Nyassa, and the country I wished to visit, besides being a good landing place, and the finest port on the coast. Thither we went, and on the same evening landed all our animals in Mikadani Bay, which lies only 25 miles north of Rovuma. The Penguin then left. The Rovuma is quite altered from what it was when we first visited it. It is probable that the freshets form banks inside the mouth, which are washed out into the deep bay, and this periodical formation probably has prevented the Arabs from using the Rovuma as a port of shipment. It is not likely that Mr. May would have made a mistake if the middle were as shoal as now. He found soundings of 3 fathoms or more. 25th March, 1866. I hired a house for $4 a month and landed all our goods from the dhow. The bay gives off a narrow channel, about 500 yards wide and 200 yards long. The middle is deep, but the sides are coral reefs and shoal. The deep part seems about 100 yards wide. Outside in the bay of Mikadani, there is no anchorage except on the edge of the reef where the Penguin got 7 fathoms, but further in it was only 2 fathoms. The inner bay is called Pemba, not Pimley, as erroneously printed in the charts of Owen. It is deep and quite sheltered. Another of a similar round form lies somewhat to the south. This bay may be 2 miles square. The cattle are all very much the worse for being knocked about in the dow. We began to prepare saddles of a very strong tree called Ntibwi, which is also used for making the hooked spear with which hippopotami are killed. The hook is very strong and tough. I applied also for 20 carriers, and a Banian engaged to get them as soon as possible. The people have no cattle here. They are half-caste Arabs mostly, and quite civil to us. 26th March, 1866. A few of the Nassau boys have the slave spirit pretty strongly. It goes deepest in those who have the darkest skins. 2 Galla men are the most intelligent and hard-working among them. Some look on work with indifference, when others are the actors. Now that I am on the point of starting on another trip into Africa, I feel quite exhilarated. When one travels with the specific object in view of ameliorating the condition of the natives, every act becomes ennobled. Whether exchanging the customary civilities or arriving at a village, accepting a night's lodging, purchasing food for the party, asking for information, or answering polite African inquiries as to our objects in traveling, we begin to spread a knowledge of that people by whose agency their land will yet become enlightened and freed from the slave trade. The mere animal pleasure of traveling in a wild, unexplored country is very great. When on lands of a couple of 1,000 feet elevation, brisk exercise imparts elasticity to the muscles, fresh and healthy blood circulates through the brain, the mind works very well, the eye is clear, the step is firm, and a day's exertion always makes the evening's repose thoroughly enjoyable. We have usually the stimulus of remote chances of danger either from beasts or men. Our sympathies are drawn out towards our humble, hardy companions by a community of interests, and it may be of perils, which make us all friends. Nothing but the most pitiable puerility would lead any manly heart to make their inferiority a theme for self-exaltation. However, that is often done, as if with the vague idea that we can, by magnifying their deficiencies, demonstrate our immaculate perfections. The effect of travel on a man whose heart is in the right place is that the mind is made more self-reliant, becomes more confident of its own resources, there is greater presence of mind. The body is soon well knit, the muscles of the limbs grow as hard as a board, and seem to have no fat. The countenance is bronzed, and there is no dyspepsia. Africa is a most wonderful country for appetite, and it is only when one gloats over marrow bones or elephant's feet that indigestion is possible. No doubt much toil is involved, and fatigue of which travelers in the more temperate climes can form but a faint conception. But the sweat of one's brow is no longer a curse when one works for God. It provides a tonic to the system and is actually a blessing. No one can truly appreciate the charm of repose unless he has undergone severe exertion. 27th March, 1866. The point of land on which the north side of the entrance to the harbor narrows it to about 300 yards is alone called Pemba. The other parts have different names. Looking northwards from the point, the first 100 yards has 90 square houses of wattled daub. A ruin, a mosque, has been built of lime and coral. The whole point is coral, and the soil is red, and covered over with dense tropical vegetation, which in the baobab is conspicuous. Dows at present come in with ease by the easterly wind which blows in the evening, and leave next morning, the land wind taking them out. While the camels and other animals are getting over their fatigues and bad bruises, we are making camels' saddles and repairing those of the mules and buffaloes. Oysters abound on all the rocks and on the trees over which the tide flows. They are small but much relished by the people. The Arabs here are a wretched lot physically, thin, washed-out creatures, many with bleared eyes. 29th through 30th March, 1866. This harbor has somewhat the shape of a bent bow or the spade on a playing card, the shaft of the arrow being the entrance in. The passage is very deep, but not more than 100 yards wide, and it goes in nearly southwest. Inside it is deep and quite secure, and protected from all winds. The lands westward rise at once to about 200 feet, and John, a hill, is the landmark by which it is best known in coming along the coast. So say the Arabs. The people have no cattle, but say there are no tsetse flies. They have not been here long, i.e., under the present system, but a ruin on the northern peninsula or face of the entrance, built of stone and lime, Arab fashion, and others on the northwest show that the place has been known and used of old. The adjacent country has large game at different water pools, and as the whole country is somewhat elevated, it probably is healthy. There is very little mangrove. Another enclosed piece of water to the south of this probably has more. The language of the people here is Swahili. They trade a little in gum copal and orchilla weed. An agent of the Zanzibar custom house presides over the customs, which are very small, and a jemadar acknowledging the sultan is the chief authority. But the people are little superior to the natives whom they have displaced. The jemadar has been very civil to me and gives me 2 guides to go on to Adonde, but no carriers can be hired. Water is found in wells in the coral rock which underlies the whole place. 4th April, 1866. When about to start from Pemba, at the entrance to the other side of the bay, one of our buffaloes gored a donkey so badly that he had to be shot. We cut off the tips of the offender's horns, on the principle of locking the stable door when the steed is stolen, and marched. We came to level spots devoid of vegetation and hard on the surface, but a deposit of water below allowed the camels to sink up to their bodies through the crust. Hauling them out, we got along to the jemadar's house, which is built of coral and lime. Hamish was profuse in his professions of desire to serve, but gave a shabby hut which let in rain and wind. I slept one night in it, and it was unbearable, so I asked the jemadar to allow me to sleep in his courtroom, where many of the sepoys were. He consented, but when I refused, then, being an excitable, nervous Arab, he took fright, mustered all his men, amounting to about 15, with matchlocks, ran off, saying he was going to kill a lion, came back, shook hands nervously with me, vowing it was a man who would not obey him. It was not you. Our goods were all out in the street, bound on the pack saddles, so at night we took the ordinary precaution of setting a guard. This excited our dignitary, and after dark all his men were again mustered with matches lighted. I took no notice of him, and after he had spent a good deal of talk, which we could hear, he called Musa and asked what I meant. The explanations of Musa had the effect of sending him to bed, and in the morning, when I learned how much I had almost unintentionally disturbed him, I told him that I was sorry, but it did not occur to me to tell him about an ordinary precaution against thieves. He thought he had given me a crushing reply when he said with vehemence, "But there are no thieves here." I did not know till afterwards that he and others had done me an ill turn in saying that no carriers could be hired from the independent tribes adjacent. They are low-coast Arabs, 3/4 African, and as usual possess the bad without the good qualities of both parents. Many of them came and begged brandy and laughed when they remarked that they could drink it in secret but not openly. They have not, however, introduced it as an article of trade, as we Christians have done on the west coast. 6th April, 1866. We made a short march round to the southwest side of the lake and spent the night at a village in that direction. There are 6 villages dotted round the inner harbor, and the population may amount to 250 or 300 souls, coast Arabs and their slaves. The southern portion of the harbor is deep, from 10 to 14 fathoms, but the northwestern part is shoal and rocky. Very little is done in the way of trade. Some sorghum, some seed, gum copal, and orchilla weed constitute the commerce of the port. I saw 2 Banian traders settled here. 17th April, 1866. Went about south from Kidani with a Somali guide named Ben Ali, or Bon Ali, a good-looking, obliging man, who was to get $20 to take us up to Ngomano. Our path lay in a valley, with well-wooded heights on each side, but the grass towered over our heads and gave the sensation of smothering, whilst the sun beat down on our heads very fiercely, and there was not a breath of air stirring. Not understanding camels, I had to trust to the sepoys who overloaded them, and before we had accomplished our march of about 7 miles, they were knocked up. 8th April, 1866. We spent the Sunday at a village called Nagayendi. Here, on the evening of the 7th April, our buffaloes and camels were first bitten by the tsetse fly. We had passed through some pieces of dense jungle, which, though they offered no obstruction to foot passengers, but rather an agreeable shade, had to be cut for the tall camels, and fortunately we found the Makonde of this village glad to engage themselves by the day, either as woodcutters or carriers. We had left many things with the jemadar from an idea that no carriers could be procured. I lightened the camels and had a party of woodcutters to heighten and widen the path in the dense jungle into which we now penetrated. Every now and then we emerged on open spaces where the Makonde have cleared gardens for sorghum, maize, and cassava. The people were very much taken up with the camels and buffaloes than with me. They are all independent of each other, and no paramount chief exists. Their foreheads may be called compact, narrow, and rather low, the alae nazi expanded laterally, lips full, not excessively thick, limbs and body well formed, hands and feet small, color dark and light brown, height middle size, and bearing independent. 10th April, 1866. We reached a village called Nari, latitude 10 degrees, 23 minutes, 14 seconds south. Many of the men had touches of fever. I gave medicine to 11 of them, and next morning all were better. Food is abundant and cheap. Our course is nearly south and in wadis, from which, following the trade road, we often ascend the heights, and then from the villages, which are on the higher land, we descend to another on the same wadi. No running water is seen. The people depend on wells for a supply. 11th April, 1866. At Tandahara, we were still ascending as we went south. The soil is very fertile, with a good admixture of sand in it, but no rocks are visible. Very heavy crops of maize and sorghum are raised, and the cassava bushes are 7 feet in height. The bamboos are cleared off them, spread over the space to be cultivated, and burned to serve as manure. Iron is very scarce, for many of the men appear with wooden spears. They find none here, but in some spots where an ooze issued from the soil, iron rust appeared. At each of the villages where we spent a night we presented a fathom of calico, and the headman always gave a fowl or two and a basket of rice or maize. The Makonde dialect is quite different from Swahili, but from their intercourse with the coast Arabs, many of the people have acquired a knowledge of Swahili. 12th April, 1866. On starting, we found the jungle so dense that the people thought there was no cutting it. It continued upwards of 3 miles. The trees are not large, but so closely planted together that a great deal of labor was required to widen and heighten the path. Where bamboos prevail, they have starved out the woody trees. The reason why the trees are not large is because all the spaces we passed over were formerly garden ground before the Makonde had been thinned by the slave trade. As soon as a garden is deserted, a thick crop of trees of the same sorts as those formerly cut down springs up, and here the process of woody trees starving out their fellows and occupying the land without dense scrub below has not had time to work itself out. Many are mere poles, and so intertwined with climbers as to present the appearance of a ship's ropes and cables shaken in among them, and many have woody stems as thick as an 11-inch hawser. One species may be likened to the scabbard of a dragoon's sword, but along the middle of the flat side runs a ridge, from which springs up every few inches a bunch of inch-long, straight, sharp thorns. It hangs straight for a couple of yards, but as if it could not give its thorns a fair chance of mischief, it suddenly bends on itself, and all its cruel points are now at right angles to what they were before. Darwin's observation shows a great deal of what looks like instinct in these climbers. This species seems to be eager for mischief. Its tangled limbs hang out, ready to inflict injury on all passers-by. Another climber is so tough it is not to be broken by the fingers. Another appears at its root as a young tree, but has the straggling habits of its class, as may be seen by its cords stretched some 50 or 60 feet off. It is often 2 inches in diameter. You cut it through at one part and find it reappear 40 yards off. Another climber is like the leaf of an aloe, but convoluted as strangely as shavings from the plane of a carpenter. It is dark green in color, and when its bark is taken off, it is beautifully striated beneath, lighter and darker green, like the rings of growth on wood. Still another is a thin string with a succession of large knobs, and another has its bark pinched up all round at intervals so as to present a great many cutting edges. One sort need scarcely be mentioned, in which all along its length are strong bent hooks, placed in a way that will hold one if it can but grapple with him, for that is very common and not like those mentioned, which the rather seem to be stragglers from the Carboniferous period of geologists, when pachydermata wriggled unscathed among tangled masses worse than these. We employed about 10 jolly young Makonde to deal with these prehistoric plants in their own way, for they are accustomed to clearing spaces for gardens, and went at the work with a will, using tomahawks well adapted for the work. They whittled away right manfully, taking in an axe when any trees had to be cut. Their pay, arranged beforehand, was to be 1 yard of calico per day. This is not much, seeing we are still so near the sea-coast. Climbers and young trees melted before them like a cloud before the sun. Many more would have worked than we employed, but we used the precaution of taking the names of those engaged. The tall men become exhausted soonest, while the shorter men worked vigorously still. But a couple days' hard work seemed to tell on the best of them. It is doubtful if any but meat-eating people can stand long-continued labor without exhaustion. The Chinese may be an exception. When French navies were first employed, they could not do a tithe of the work of our English ones. But when the French were fed in the same style as the English, they performed equally well. Here the Makande have rarely the chance of a good feed of meat. It is only when one of them is fortunate enough to spear a wild hog or an antelope that they know this luxury. If a fowl is eaten, they get but a taste of it with their porridge. 13th April, 1866. We now began to descend the northern slope down to the Rovuma, and a glimpse could occasionally be had of the country. It seemed covered with great masses of dark green forest, but the undulations occasionally looked like hills, and here and there a sterculia had put on yellow foliage in anticipation of the coming winter. More frequently our vision was circumscribed to a few yards, till our merry woodcutters made for us the pleasant scene of a long vista fit for camels to pass. As a whole, the jungle would have made the authors of the natty little hints to travelers smile at their own productions, good enough, perhaps, where one has an open country with trees and hills, by which to take bearings, estimate distances, see that one point is fair and square with protractor and compass. But so long as we remained within the vegetation that is fed by the moisture from the Indian Ocean, the steamy, smothering air and dank, rank, luxuriant vegetation made me feel like it, struggling for existence, and no more capable of taking bearings than if I had been in a hogshead and observing through the bunghole. An old Mananico headman presented a coat and asked if the sepoys wished to cut its throat. The Johannese, being of a different sect of Mahometans, wanted to cut it in some other way than their Indian co-religionists. Then ensued a fierce dispute as to who was the right sort of Muslim. It was interesting to see that not Christians alone, but other nations feel keenly on religious subjects. I saw rocks of grey sandstone, like that which overlies coal, and the Rovuma in the distance. Didi is the name of a village whose headsman, Chambokea, is said to be a doctor. All the headmen pretend or are really doctors. However, one, Fundindomba, came after me for medicine for himself. 14th April, 1866. Today we succeeded in reaching the Rovuma, where some very red cliffs appear on the opposite heights, and close by where it is marked on the map that the pioneer turned back in 1861. Here we rested on Sunday, 15th. 16th April, 1866. Our course now lay westwards, along the side of that ragged outline of tableland, which we had formerly seen from the river as flanking both sides. There it appeared a range of hills shutting in Rovuma. Here we had spurs jutting out towards the river, and valleys retiring from a mile to 3 miles inland. Sometimes we wended our way round them, sometimes rose over and descended their western sides, and then a great deal of wood cutting was required. The path is not straight, but from one village to another. We came perpetually on gardens, and remarked that rice was sown among the other grain. There must be a good deal of moisture at other times to admit of this succeeding. At present the crops were suffering for want of rain. We could purchase plenty of rice for the sepoys, and well it was so, for the supply which was to last till we arrived at Negamano was finished on the 13th. An old doctor, with our food awaiting, presented me with 2 large bags of rice, and his wife husked it for us. 17th April, 1866. I had to leave the camels in the hands of the sepoys. I ordered them to bring as little luggage as possible, and the havildar assured me that 2 buffaloes were amply sufficient to carry all they would bring. I now find that they have more than full loads for 2 buffaloes, 2 mules, and 2 donkeys. But when these animals fall down under them, they assure me with so much positiveness that they are not overloaded, that I have to be silent, or only, as I have several times done before, express the opinion that they will kill these animals. This observation on my part leads them to hide their things in the packs of the camels, which also are overburdened. I fear that my experiment with the tsetse will be vitiated, but no symptoms yet occur in any of the camels except weariness. The sun is very sharp, it scorches. Nearly all the sepoys had fever, but it is easily cured. They never required to stop marching, and we cannot make over 4 or 5 miles a day, which movement aids in the cure. In all cases of fever, removal from the spot of attack should be made. After the fever among the sepoys, the Nassik boys took their turn along with the Johannes. 18th April, 1866. Ben Ali misled us away up to the north in spite of my protest when we turned in that direction. He declared that was the proper path. We had much wood cutting and found that our course that day and next was to enable him to visit and return from one of his wives, a comely Makande woman. He brought her to call on me, and I had to be polite to the lady, though we lost a day by the zigzag. This is one way by which the Arabs gain influence. A great many very light-colored people are strewed among the Makande, but only one of these had the Arab hair. On asking Ali whether any attempts had been made by Arabs to convert those with whom they enter into such intimate relationships, he replied that the Makande had no idea of a deity. No one could teach them, though Makande slaves, when taken to the coast and elsewhere, were made Mohammedans. Since the slave trade was introduced, this tribe has much diminished in numbers, and one village makes war upon another and kidnaps, but no religious teaching has been attempted. The Arabs come down to the native ways and make no efforts to raise the natives to theirs. It is better that it is so, for the coast Arabs' manners and morals would be no improvement on the pagan African. 19th April, 1866. We were led up over a hill again, and on to the level of the plateau, where the evaporation is greater than in the valley, and tasted water of an agreeable coldness for the first time this journey. The people, especially the women, are very rude, and the men very eager to be employed as woodcutters. Very merry they are at it, and every now and then one raises a cheerful shout, in which all join. I suppose they are urged on by a desire to please their wives with a little clothing. The higher up the Ravuma we ascend, the people are more and more tattooed on the face and on all parts of the body. The teeth are filed to points, and huge lip rings are worn by the women. Some few Mabiha men from the south side of the river have lip rings too. 20th April. A Johanna man allowed the camels to trespass and destroy a man's tobacco patch. The owner would not allow us after this to pass through his rice field in which the route lay. I examined the damage and made the Johanna man pay a yard of calico for it, which set matters aright. Tsetse are biting the buffaloes again. Elephants, hippopotami, and pigs are the only game here, but we see none. The tsetses feed on them. In the low meadowland, from 1 to 3 miles broad, which lies along both banks, we have brackish pools, and one, a large one, which we passed, called Wrong Way, had much fish, and salt is got from it. 21st April, 1866. After a great deal of cutting, we reached the valley of the Mahembwe to spend Sunday, all glad that it had come round again. Here some men came to our camp from Ndonde, who report that an invasion of Mazitu had 3 months ago swept away all the food out of the country, and they are now obliged to send in every direction for provisions. When saluting, they catch each other's hands and say aye, aye, but the general mode, introduced probably by the Arabs, is to take hold of the right hand and say, Marhaba, welcome. A wall-eyed, ill-looking fellow who helped to urge on the attack on our first visit in 1861, and the man to whom I gave cloth to prevent a collision, came about us disguised in a jacket. I knew him well, but said nothing to him. 23rd April, 1866. When we marched this morning, we passed the spot where an animal had been burned in the fire, and on inquiry I found that it is the custom when a leopard is killed to take off the skin and consume the carcass thus, because the Makande do not eat it. The reason they gave for not eating flesh, which is freely eaten by other tribes, is that the leopard devours men. This shows the opposite of an inclination to cannibalism. All the rocks we have seen showed that the plateau consists of gray sandstone, capped by a ferruginous sandy conglomerate. We now came to the blocks of silicified wood lying on the surface. It is so like recent wood that no one who has not handled it would conceive it to be stone and not wood. The outer surface preserves the grain or woody fiber. The inner is generally silica. Buffaloes bitten by tsetse again show no bad effects from it. One mule is, however, dull and out of health. I thought that this might be the effect of the bite till I found that his back was so strained that he could not stoop to drink, and could only eat the tops of grasses. An ox would have been ill in 2 days after the biting on the 7th. A carrier stole a shirt, went off unsuspected. When the loss was ascertained, the man's companions tracked him with Ban Ali by night and got him in his hut, and then collected the headmen of the village, who fined him about 4 times the value of what had been stolen. They came back in the morning without seeming to think that they had done aught to be commended. This was the only case of theft we had noticed, and the treatment showed a natural sense of justice. 24th April, 1866. We had showers occasionally, but at night all the men were under cover of screens. The fevers were speedily cured. No day was lost by sickness, but we could not march more than a few miles, owing to the slowness of the sepoys. They are a heavy drag on us and of no possible use, except when acting as sentries at night. When in the way between Kidani and Rovuma, I observed a plant here called mandare, the root of which is in taste and appearance like a waxy potato. I saw it once before at the falls below the Bartose Valley in the middle of the continent. It had been brought there by an emigrant who let out the water for irrigation, and it still maintained its place in the soil. Would this not prove valuable in the soil of India? I find that it is not cultivated further up the country of the Makonde, but I shall get Ali to secure some for Bombay. 25th April, 1866. A serpent bit Jack, our dog, above the eye. The upper eyelid swelled very much, but no other symptoms appeared, and next day all swelling was gone. The serpent was either harmless, or the quantity of poison injected very small. The pace of the camels is distressingly slow, and it suits the sepoys to make it slower than natural by sitting down to smoke and eat. The grass is high, and ground under it damp and steamy. 26th April, 1866. On the 25th we reached Nari, and resolved to wait the next day and buy food, as it is not so plentiful in front. The people are eager traders in meal, fowl, eggs, and honey. The women are very rude. Yesterday I caught a sepoy, Pando, belaboring a camel with a big stick as thick as any part of his arm. The path being narrow, it could not get out of his way. I shouted at him to desist. He did not know I was in sight. Today the effect of the bad usage is seen in the animal being quite unable to move its leg. Inflammation has set up in the hip joint. I am afraid that several bruises which have festered on the camels and were to me unaccountable have been wilfully bestowed. This same Pando and another left Zanzibar drunk. He then stole a pair of socks from me, and has otherwise been perfectly useless. Even a pimple on his leg was an excuse for doing nothing for many days. We had to leave this camel at Nari under charge of the headman. 28th April, 1866. The hills on the north now retire out of our sight. A gap in the southern plateau gives passage to a small river, which arises in a lakelet of some size, 8 or 10 miles inland. The river and lakelet are both called Nagandi. The latter is so broad that men cannot be distinguished, even by the keen eyes of the natives on the other side. It is very deep and abounds in large fish. The people who live here are Mabiha. A few miles above this gap, the southern highland falls away, and there are lakelets on marshes, also abounding in fish. An uninhabited space next succeeds, and then we have the Matambwe country, which extends up to Nogamano. The Matambwe seem to be a branch of the Makonde, and a very large one. Their country extends a long way south, and is well stocked with elephants and gum copal trees. They speak a language slightly different from that of the Makonde, but they understand them. The Matambwe women are, according to Ali, very dark, but very comely, though they do wear the lip ring. They carry their ivory, gum copal, and slaves to Ibo or Wibo. 29th April, 1866. We spend Sunday the 29th on the banks of the Rovuma at a village called Nachachu, nearly opposite Kayoyamba, the first of the Matambwe, whose chief is called Kimbembe. Ali draws a very dark picture of the Makonde. He says they know nothing of a deity, they pray to their mothers when in distress or dying, know nothing of a future state, nor have they any religion except a belief in medicine, and every headsman is a doctor. No Arab has ever tried to convert them, but occasionally a slave taken to the coast has been circumcised in order to be clean. Some of them pray, and say they know not the ordeal or Muavi. The Nasik boys failed me when I tried to communicate some knowledge through them. They say they do not understand the Makonde language, though some told me that they came from Nondes, which is the headquarters of the Makonde. Ali says that the Makonde blame witches for disease and death. When one of a village dies, the whole population departs, saying, "That is a bad spot." They are said to have been notorious for fines, but an awe has come over them and no complaints have been made, though our animals in passing the gardens have broken a good deal of corn. Ali says they fear the English. This is an answer to my prayer for influence on the minds of the heathen. I regret that I cannot speak to them that good of his name which I ought. I went with the Maconde to see a specimen of the gum copal tree in the vicinity of this village. The leaves are in pairs, glossy green, with the veins a little raised on both face and back. The smaller branches diverge from the same point, the fruit of which we saw the shells seems to be a nut. Some animal had in eating them cut through them. The bark of the tree is of light ash color, the gum was oozing from the bark at wounded places, and it drops on the ground from branches. It is thus that insects are probably embedded in the gum copal. The people dig in the vicinity of modern trees in the belief that the more ancient trees which dropped their gum before it became an article of commerce must have stood there. In digging none may be found on one day, but God, Mungu, may give it to us on the next. To this all the Maconde present assented and showed me the consciousness of his existence was present in their minds. The Maconde get the gum in large quantities, and this attracts the coast Arabs, who remain a long time in the country purchasing it. Hernia humoralis abounds. It is ascribed to beer drinking. 30th April 1866. Many ulcers burst forth on the camels. Some seem old dowel bruises. They come back from pasture bleeding in a way that no rubbing against a tree would account for. I am sorry to suspect foul play. The buffaloes and mules are badly used, but I cannot be always near to prevent it. Bang is not smoked, but tobacco is. The people have no sheep or goats, only fowls, pigeons, and Muscovy ducks are seen. Honey is very cheap. A good large pot of about a gallon with 4 fowls was given for 2 yards of calico. Buffaloes again bitten by tsetse, and by another fly exactly like the house fly, but having a straight hard proboscis instead of a soft one. Other large flies make the blood run. The tsetse does not disturb the buffaloes, but these others and the smaller flies do. The tsetse seem to like the camel best. From these they are gorged with blood. They do not seem to care for the mules and donkeys. End of chapter 1.